Hey guys, Matt, IronTrap Garage. We are back working on the 39 Forgotten Hot Rod project, and our to-do list is getting very short before we can finally take this thing around the block for the first time. In the last video you saw Mike and I and Jason and Justin and I, over a period of like 2 weeks, basically worked together to get all the glass stuff sorted out, and it took a little longer than expected. The windshield was just fighting us a little bit, but in the end, Mike and I were able to bang out all the windows after we got the windshield kind of sorted out, and it went pretty well. So what we're trying to do in this video is just knock out the last few little things and try and take this thing around the block. That is my goal by the end of this video. So the big things that we need to knock out really is the shock situation. So a lot of people have commented in the videos. You notice when a couple of us are working in the car, or one of us gets in the car and stands on the running board, the car like sways side to side real bad like a boat, which obviously isn't good. That's because we had no shocks hooked up, and it's a big car, and it sways back and forth with this buggy type Ford suspension. So I was going to originally leave the stock lever shocks on this car because I'm trying to keep it like budget friendly, use what we can that came with the car. But after I started looking at things, number one, a couple of the shocks were dead when I went to pull on them. They had no pressure at all, so that was no good. And number two, I realized that because we lowered the car so much, I was going to have to create some like custom bracketry or move the shocks up so that we could get some throw in the shocks, and that just obviously was going to be a lot of work for kind of used up old shocks, which isn't good. So I decided to jump over and do some tube shocks. It's going to make the car ride better. It's probably going to help with the sway situation a lot better, and we should be able to do it with stuff that basically I have laying around, aside from ordering some brand new, just like cheapo shocks from the local parts store. So what I decided to do is dig around a little bit in my parts stash, and I came up with all these different factory Ford, and some of them may have even been modified, but some of these are like factory Ford tube shock adapters or aftermarket for Ford from back in the day. There's all these different mounts that they made. So here's some shorty ones to have like an extra bracket on them. These ones are probably the most common you'll see if you go to swap meets and stuff. They're like a plate, and you'll notice on the back side they have a pad that looks just like the base of the lever shocks. And what this is, it's meant to mount right where the lever shocks go, and it kind of kicks it at an angle that gets everything to line up so you can mount tube shocks pretty easy, was the idea. The other style that you will come across, and there is a bunch of them. I have the other one I think laying by the car. I was starting to test fitting, but is this style that actually for the back will bolt to the backing plates. All of these are they're made to be like not universal, but they're made to fit in using existing hardware, but that doesn't mean you have to use it that way. So what I'm going to do is try and like utilize, I think I could use some of the front ones and mount them up. I got these real long ones here, but I think these are going to be too long for a lowered car. But I'm gonna mount some of these up in the front. In the rear, these you have to actually put in. They would have originally come with longer hardware and spacers to mount them on the backing plates, which works well, but I gotta like take the drum off and take the backing plates all apart and find that hardware. It's kind of a pain in the ass, and it's still gonna be kind of in the way. So I'm gonna try and find a place to put these on the cross member or something, and then probably like weld a tab to the bottom of the tube on the rear, get them mounted up, and then we can work on, once I get all that done, we can just work on knocking the last few things out. Hopefully we can take this thing around the block on its first test drive onto the road outside of the yard. Fingers crossed. I'm gonna get working. All right, so here are these common mounts I was talking about. I'll show you guys. So this is the real long one. This is a shorter one that I think would work better for a car that's lowered. The tall one will put us way up in the wheel well, which definitely works, but I'm a little worried when the car is lowered down that we may actually hit on the top here, because this is fixed here, and as the suspension goes up and down, or the car goes up and down, but this area is going to be kind of fixed, so that's going to cause a problem if that hits the fender when we drop it down. So this one's probably about half the height. I think it should be good. The other one we had was like half of this, and I think it would be a problem to find a shock easily right off the shelf. Now you can buy those real short like Shorty Shocks from SoCal are one of those places that works, but I'm trying to just get something that we can just get right off the parts store counter, and it's something that's fairly easy to get. I think I've looked them up before, and like VW Beetles, stock shocks for like the rear of the Beetles are this style where it has just a little round nut, little tube on it that works well, bushing. So you can see that mounts up like that, and if we clamp that in place or bolt it in place, we should be able to take some measurements here. So brought some hardware with, and we will try and just temporarily bolt this in place. All right, so we'll try and get you a better shot here. You can see where the shock mount bolts up. That's in place of the stock shock. And then what I think I can do is this area right here, I know it's a little hard to see, but where the stock like shock link went, I think that's pretty close to in line with there, or a slight angle, which would be okay. And I think what I can do is make a stud that's actually gonna, this bolt's like broken off in here, so we'll need to extract that anyways. I'll probably turn down a stud on the lathe for this that will mount, that'll be the right diameter, that will mount right on a stock tube shock. That'll bolt through there, and then that should be kind of a stock or a straight shot for that. So that's pretty much that sorted out. So I'm gonna take some measurements, and what we're gonna do is measure now with the car all the way hanging like this. This would be the most extended amount that the shock would be. So this would be the eye, and then you would measure up here to this eye, and whatever that distance is, that's the longest that we need the shock to extend to. And then we'll drop the car down and see where it compresses to, and that's where the shock will need to be for our shortest measurement. So I'm going to take all those measurements in the front and work on the rear. There it is. There's a little piece knocked out. Sweet. That's all it took. Alright, so you should be able to test fit this now. And that seats through, and I can get a nut on the other side. It's pretty good. So we knocked that little piece out just with using the reamer. Actually, even though I was going to ream it out, it actually knocked it and spun it loose because it was just the remnants left. But it all fits real good, so I'm going to clean it out with some pre, and then we should be good to go here. We're able to save that. So these are the shocks that we ended up using. They're basically Volkswagen shocks for the later, I don't know, from the 60s all the way till like Super Beetles, you know, till the end of the air-cooled Volkswagen Beetle. These were the shocks that were used in the rear. The biggest thing was I was looking for something I could get quick. It was super affordable, and I think they ended up being like 18 bucks or 20 bucks a piece or something like that. I found them on Amazon. Now the small little things, the caveat is the hole right here for both sides where the bushing is slightly too small to fit like the stock Ford bushing size in there. So what it is, I picked it because it's really nice because I can ream the hole out just a tiny bit using a step or a drill index and just go like one tiny size bigger, and then you can just fit a normal standard bolt right through it. So that's what we did in the back. I welded, just cut off some grade 8 bolts and welded them to the top of the rear. Just super simple old school stuff. You guys know in some of the other projects I go way more in depth. This car's supposed to be just like a basic backyard type build, and we're not going nuts. So same thing with the front. So we're going to reuse these little mounts here where the shock link would have been originally. So they also double as the pin that goes down through the perch for the wishbones. And on these later cars, they actually use this little section for where a ball would mount for the lever shock. So we already know that that's strong enough to use a shock on because that's what they used it from the factory. So I'm going to use a bolt. Actually, this bolt fits right through like that, and it's a nice, pretty good fit. And what we can do is then slide this. Now that I've reamed this over, this should fit just like that. And I could put a lock washer and a nut on there, and then we can mount up our bracket, which I actually ended up modifying, and I cut the stud off. The easiest way to do it was just to cut the stud off, and I TIG welded a bolt right to it that's the same size. Again, I'm not proud of this as like show winning repairs or modifications, but it's simple, down and dirty. It shows you guys how you can do it. I have like next to no money into these shocks. I could have bought some like SoCal shocks or something that were shorty shocks that would have worked for this, but you end up getting like $200, $300, $400, maybe not 400, but I think they're over $100 for a pair of shocks. So I saved a little bit of money on this, which we're trying to do with this project. So I dusted everything up in the wheel well with the Eastwood rust encapsulator just to kind of seal any surface rust or a little bit of rust in weird spots that was rusty where paint had fallen off, and that's pretty much drying now. So I'm going to mount this bracket up, and then I'll dust everything with paint once everything's mounted up. So I'm going to get this mounted up in the wheel well, and then we can mount our shock up and see how that looks as well. So I got the car dropped down, all excited, and I realized as I put the car down that I never really checked all the play and everything with the car all the way down, and I failed horribly. So I put the car down, and it's like rock solid here, and I laid underneath the car to look in the back, and it's like just bottoming out. So when I measured, bottoming out on the shock, so when I measured the shock's length, I actually was planning on putting the little like stud on the bottom of the rear, which is like 2-3 inches that it gains you when you put that underneath. And for whatever reason, at the last minute, I decided to put it on the top, not thinking about that. And I'm like, man, this is really stiff. It solved our problem with it swaying all over. And then yeah, it's I laid underneath the car, got all freaking dirty, laid underneath the car and kind of pushed up and looked down, and you can hear it's like bottoming out on the shock, which obviously isn't going to work. And the front, I'm actually a little worried might be the same thing, and I might need to actually go to those longer adapters. Just one of those stupid things. So I'm gonna lift it back up, attack the rear, get the rear all situated, test fit it with it tack welded, not weld it fully and paint it like a dumbass like I did. And yeah, and we'll see if we can get this right. But the concept is there, everything seems right. It's just that like those little things, and the, you know, this thing is pretty slammed, so the amount of compression of the suspension when you drop it down is pretty big on this car, and I didn't kind of think that through fully. So just stupid thing, me not really thinking it through and just kind of working on it, you know, an hour here, an hour there. So I'll lift it back up, try and fix it. I'm gonna call it a night for tonight and come back at it, you know, tomorrow night and see if I can get it sorted out. All right, our to-do list, short to-do list, is pretty much done. So Mike and I worked and just did a real quick front end alignment on this. We just basically, on these cars, you just set the toe, which you can do with a tape measure pretty quickly on the lift, set it down, check it, and it's in the ballpark. This car is not done. We're just getting it to the point where it's drivable around the neighborhood, and we filled it with coolant and all that good stuff. So we're gonna pull it out, let it sit here and warm up, add coolant to it so we got plenty of coolant, it's not gonna overheat. And then we're gonna do our sketchy test drive around the block, and hopefully we make it back. That'll be our small victory for the day. So let's hope we can make it happen. Nuts and bolts and checking everything, and the temperature seems good. We got coolant in it, but try not to get my hand in it. Fail. Freaking water pump is cracked. So we can still drive it around the block, but like, yeah, now we got to take that apart and fix it before we actually really start driving it. But it's just bubbling. I think it'll be okay for us just to drive around the block. It's all warmed up. So yeah, I think we're ready to take a hop right in it and drive around the block.
Brakes are nice.
Yeah, the brakes are actually like the best part of this car.
You're good.
Oh boy.
Lunch car.
Oh boy. My neighbors are used to this nonsense.
As we get run into.
They're like, oh, Matt, in another piece of car.
Yep, that's exactly what they're thinking too.
Shifter.
Yeah.
Won't go into second. So we get first and third right now. Let's take this bump at speed.
Wasn't bad.
Oh, that wasn't bad at all, actually. Other than some like banging and knocking in the car, it's really not that bad. The shocks are like a huge help. Like we're rolling at speed
And the car isn't falling over.
The car isn't like we're riding in a boat. Biggest thing is right now is I got this
Gauge panel.
No, the choke, the automatic choke is sticking open. It's like it's not popping into. Now that the car's warmed up, it's not dropping into normal idle. So we're gonna shut it off. I'm gonna quick unhook that, and then yeah, we will do a little drive-by.
Definitely need to work on the carburetor a little bit.
It needs a little bit of work on some of that, but not too bad.
Oh, Jesus.
Definitely needs some work on the carb and stuff. Oh boy. Sort of. I think this carb or something is not quite right, but...
What do you mean, the teapot isn't good?
Well, probably also a teapot that's been sitting around forever.
Yeah.
Probably not real good. Oh boy.
Upset the neighbor.
Make sure it doesn't stall in front of them. It'll make fun of us. Hey!
Oh, that one was a little tough. That's a good sign. Good sign. Good day, man. Good day. Whew. hubcap on this side.
We lost it?
No, the hubcap's missing on this side.
That's what I said.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, duh.
Yeah, you need to turn it around there, pal. Stop tearing up my grass.
All right, so we successfully drove the Forgotten 39 hot rod around the neighborhood, and it was really cool to drive this thing. So obviously, like with any of these things, there was a bunch of bugs. The thing driving around and stopping, it was stalling every now and then. We could tell that it's not running 100%. I'm sure the carburetor, because this engine did sit for a while, is not 100%. We have a couple tiny little coolant leaks where the old brass water necks, where I brazed them, there's actually little tiny like hairline cracks in it from the brass basically being like thin or old. And then there was like one little spot where I didn't get, when I finished my weld, there's a little pinhole of a leak. So little stuff that we could fix, which is no big deal. The water pump is a big deal. We got to change that water pump out eventually. It's just seeping, but it's something obviously before we start like really putting miles on the car we need to take care of. So there's a little bit of help with the cooling system that we're going to need to go through, number one. Carburetor probably needs to be gone through, so we're going to take a look at that. But for now, we could start it, drive it. I mean, even though it's a little quirky with some of the stuff, we're doing pretty good. It actually drove half decent down the road. It didn't sound or feel that weird. A little bit of clunking in the back end, but the thing is pretty slammed. So sometimes when these things are hammered like this, I don't know if it's the shocks or what's making a little bit of sound, but it does drive pretty nice, which is really good. And it's really awesome to finally be at the end of the project just a little bit. So we're gonna work on getting all the last little odds and ends tied up on this thing in the spring. My goal was to get this thing so that it's drivable in the winter, and we can pull the 47 Ford for my dad inside and get that going. So for right now, this probably won't have a lot of updates till probably the spring once we start driving this thing, putting some miles on it, which will be really, really awesome. So the other thing to mention is stop sending us money. I know I mentioned the raffle thing. We are not accepting raffle money yet. I don't care how excited you are. Stop. I know it sounds weird to say this. Stop sending us money. We don't want your checks. We don't want cash. We don't want the money for the raffle. If we do a raffle, which I'm actually leaning towards not, we will announce it, but there is some legal stuff with the Gaming Commission that I think we're going to try and stay above board and not raffle it, unfortunately. So what we may have to do is find another fun way to get this thing out there in the world. We may do a trade option or something like that, or we may just offer it up for sale, and who knows. But for right now, we're going to put some miles on the thing in the spring. I'm probably going to let my dad drive it around a little bit and let it break down on him, and we can work out the quirks with him. And then we'll figure out what we're going to do maybe later in the year, but we're not going to be raffling it like we mentioned it, just to stay safe. So that is the big update on the 39 Ford project. We're really excited. Last thing is, make sure you tune in. We're going to be doing lives the last Sunday of every month. If you guys have any questions about these cars or anything else, tune into the live. We're going to be doing one the last Sunday of this month, and you guys can ask questions, and I'll show you what's going on in the shop. That's all I have for this one. Appreciate you guys following along through the whole 39 Forgotten hot rod build. It's been super fun. Thanks, guys. Catch you later.